The Shophetim Series. Black Gold. Intro. Shophetim Series. This series will be based on the various judges, or Shophetim, and their missions. Each book features one or more of the various modern-day judges. In ancient times, God raised up judges to deal with his people. To not only to judge and enforce the laws, but to help defend and destroy the enemy. Now, the time has come for the judges to return. The supernatural have always walked beside the natural human world, but due to the incline of darkness rising, it was time for the judges to make a return to defend the innocent and dish out justice. Modern-day judges still do much as the old ways. All trace their lineage back to the 12 tribes of Israel. They serve as leaders and execute the laws and the land they govern. Not man's laws, but God's. Most major cities have one judge, and that judge is replaced by the oldest sibling. If there is more than one sibling, they have the option of becoming a wandering judge. The wandering judges wander about the world to help other judges, towns, agencies, and individuals with dishing out law and order, as well as the Lord's vengeance and justice. Most judges have their unique abilities, granted unto them individually by God based on their talents, but all can see into the spirit realm. The judges have power to decide justice and punishment right then and there on the spot, while agents must bring the creature in, unless it is a life or death situation. Basically, agents are the police and judges are the judges. Like the judicial system, their word is the last. They are often aided by angels in taking down the strongholds and powers of darkness. 2 kingdoms are at war, the light and the dark, each having rank and armies. The judges are the generals. It is black and white, there is no gray area. I wanted to make it clear that the agents of the darkness are not cool, hip or awesome. Evil is evil, but in these times, evil is called good and good evil. Jesus said that would happen, but in this series, I call it how it is. All evil and powers given by Satan are darkness. All witchcraft, speaking with the dead, divination, horoscopes, etc. It is not of God. Most do not understand or want to believe. The dead are dead. These so-say ghosts are just crafty demons. People have a chance to repent, turn from their ways, and strive to live for God. They are given this chance, but if they deny it, the sentence is given by the judge. What are judges? Then the Israelites did evil in the sight of the Lord and worshipped and served the Baals, and they abandoned the Lord, the God of their fathers, who brought them out of the land of Egypt. They followed other gods from the gods of the peoples who were around them, and they bowed down to them, and offended and provoked the Lord to anger. So, they abandoned the Lord and served Baal, the pagan god of the Canaanites, and the Ashtoreth. So the anger of the Lord burned against Israel, and he gave them into the hands, power of plunderers who robbed them, and he sold them into the hands of their surrounding enemies, so that they could no longer stand in opposition before their enemies. Wherever they went, the hand of the Lord was against them for evil, misfortune, as the Lord had spoken, and as the Lord had sworn to them, so that they were severely distressed. Then the Lord raised up judges who rescued them from the hands of those who robbed them. Yet they did not listen to their judges, for they played the prostitute after other gods, and they bowed down to them. They quickly turned aside from the way in which their fathers had walked in obeying the commandments of the Lord. They did not do as their fathers. When the Lord raised up judges for them, he was with the judge, and he rescued them from the hand of their enemies all the days of the judge, for the Lord was moved to pity by their groaning, because of those who oppressed and afflicted them. But when the judge died, they turned back and behaved more corruptly than their fathers, in following and serving other gods, and bowing down to them. They did not abandon their practices or their stubborn ways. So the anger of the Lord burned against Israel, and he said, because this nation has transgressed, violated my covenant, binding agreement, which I commanded their fathers, and has not listened to my voice, I also will no longer drive out before them any of the nations which Joshua left to be conquered when he died, in order to test the loyalty of Israel by them, whether Israel will keep the way of the Lord to walk in it, as their fathers did, or not. So, the Lord allowed those nations to remain, not driving them out at once, and he did not give them into the hands of Joshua. The spirit world is real, more real in fact than this so-called reality you and I live in. There is a constant war going on between the rulers of powers and principalities of darkness, and heavenly host, angel, who ruled by our God Jesus. Some of God's creation walk in ignorance, some in light and others in darkness, but we have no real power. Only the power granted by Jesus, or a lesser power for the dark granted by the fallen ones and their leader Satan. Judges of today. The story of the judges seems to describe successive individuals, each from a different tribe of Israel, described as chosen by God to rescue the people from their enemies and establish justice. The book of Judges mentions 12 leaders who judged Israel: Othniel, Ehud, Shamgar, Deborah, Gideon, Tola, Jair, Jephthah, Ibzan, Elon, Abdon, and Samson. The judges today can each trace their lineage back to the original judges of ancient times. The first of the modern judges began in the 1800s. Only a few humans were given the power of the judges. Among them were Catherine the Great, Daniel Boone, Wyatt Earp, and many more across the globe. During the 1900s, the judges gathered together in Jerusalem and created an elder group of judges that would govern the others and pass laws as well as judgment. This was known as the Code or Council. Chapter 1. Romans 12:21. Be not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. The night air is warm and crisp, as the summer heat has yet set in on the small town 75 miles outside of Austin. In the darkness there is a subtle glow of neon signs blinking from the small bar showing open. The pinks and green hues of color attract the flying insects and light up the darkness of the lonely highway that leads out of town. The small wooden and tin building sat in the middle of a small wooded area surrounded by open lands and hills. The sounds of chirps were interrupted by the sounds of smashing wood and glass shattering, as a body is thrown through the large window and rolls onto the dirt and gravel driveway. Joseph Antonello, the FBI's Black Flies Division chef, rolled to a stop and laid on his back. The wind was knocked out of him, and shards of glass had made tiny scraps on his face and body. Drops of red began to surface as the agent curses in Spanish. Joe sat up and watched his partner Judge Michael hang from the creature's horn that they chased into the bar. The creature was a goat man that stood 8 feet tall and had a mean attitude. The fur was a grayish-brown color and covered the body of the thing. Its head and legs resembled a goat, while the arms and torso resembled a man. Much like the Pan of Greek mythology, but with a full goat face. It stunk of urine and barn animal smell, since the thing had been running in the backwoods and hills. The black files had been called in since the thing had been spotted killing cattle and stalking humans with an axe. The legends of the goat man originated in Maryland, but the goat men were really scattered among the states. Most theories suggest a government experiment gone wrong, while the judges theorized it was a mating between a fallen angel and goats. The judge was flung around as he held on for dear life on the horns from behind. A few drunk patrons screamed and ran out the bar, while others looked on in disbelief. The bartender ran to grab the phone and duck under the bar as the judge was flung above her head. Michael rolled down the wooden bar, breaking beer glasses. All but one glass remained unbroken, and it was only due to the man lifting the beer to save it last minute. Michael glanced at the man sitting in front of the bar and sighed. Save your beer, but can't save yourself, huh? Is drinking more important? Michael huffed as he slid off the bar and tried to shake the glass off his t-shirt. As the judge tried to pull himself together, Anthony Shepard, the division's newest recruit, peeled himself off the pool table. The creature had tossed him after tossing Joe out the window. Anthony grabbed a pool stick and slammed it into the back of the goat man. The stick broke, sending splinters everywhere. Anthony stood there and just looked up at the thing in shock after the stick broke. The stick did nothing but just pissed it off. The goat man screeched and turned to wrap his long fingers around his neck. Blood and sweat beaded off his dark-colored forehead as the creature lifted Anthony off the ground. Anthony tried to reach for his gun under his shirt that was holstered to his black BDU pants, but the goat man used his other hand to smack the gun away. The goat man screamed in the face of Anthony, causing spit and a foul smell to waft from its mouth. Anthony could barely breathe as it was, and this thing's nasty breath fogged his nostrils. The agent made a face at the smell, forgetting for a moment he was being choked. Joe did his best to enter back into the bar the same way he was thrown out of. He stepped over glass and pushed the rest of the window back inside the bar. Joseph yelled for the other bystanders to get out as he unholstered his gun. It was the same gun Michael had made him to kill Raum last year. The Raum case was that of a demon-lead cult that brought the judge and Joe together and helped launch the Black Files division. The Black Files is the division of the FBI that seeks out the paranormal and troubled creatures to bring them to justice. Along with the help of the COUD, the Council of Judges, the Black Files division had spread across America and even into other parts of the world with their own divisions. The main reason being, since the rise of darkness and the supernatural beings coming forth, a system and laws needed to be set in place. Rules, regulations, and registrations were needed to keep everyone, human and non-human alike, safe. The judges had fully joined forces with the world's law enforcement, giving them not only aid, but their expertise in dealing with the creatures. Some were minute and harmless, while others, like this goat man, were dangerous. The agents and judge wanted to bring this creature in alive, but they had no choice now. Not only was he endangering the lives of the people in this bar, but he attacked and was trying to kill them. After Michael composed himself, the judge unsheathed his gladius sword and slammed it into the back of the goat. The goat man dropped Anthony while screaming in pain. It tried to reach behind its back to get at Michael. The judge twisted the sword in deeper as he avoided the swipes from the goat man's claws. While the goat man stood up straight to try and reach Michael better, Joseph saw his opportunity and shot the creature in the chest. The final bullet went through the head on the goat man, causing it to stop all its madness. Michael let his sword go and watched it sway a bit before dropping dead on the ground beside Anthony. Anthony kicked the thing with his boots to make sure it was dead. Michael removed the sword from the thing's back and outstretched a hand to help Anthony up from the ground. The new agent took the judge's hand and rose from the ground. Joseph holstered his weapon and walked towards his partners. "Are they always this rowdy?" Anthony asked the judge as his face was twisted in disgust as he glared at the goat man. "You should see werewolves 10 times worse, man." Mike sighed and shook his head. "I think the worst is demons, but that is my personal opinion." Joe put his hands on his hips and joined the two, staring at the dead goat man. "So, what do we do now? Call the coroner or the veterinarian?" Anthony asked in a joking manner. "Our guys have a crew that comes and cleans up this mess." Michael spoke as he walked to the goat man, pulled out his sword, and proceeded to clean it with a few napkins off the overturned table. "Yeah, we just get stuck with the paperwork." Joe frowns as he watches Mike. "No, we have paperwork on our end too. Or have you forgotten what your girlfriend does for a living?" Mike added, raising a brow. He spoke of Samara Morgan. She is one of the many record keepers of the Cowd, a secretary to the Black Files, and dating Joseph. Anthony was a rookie, but even he remembered that. The rookie rose a brow and shook his head at Joe's response. I'm so telling Sammy you forgot about her. Anthony chuckled as he playfully glanced at his boss Joe. The judge did his best to hide his smile but failed. Don't you dare. I will have to make up for it by watching a marathon of The Lord of the Rings and buying her a bucket of ice cream and manga. Joseph glared at Anthony. Are you asking me as my boss or friend? Anthony looked at him sideways as he tried not to smile. Really? Joseph huffed, narrowing his eyes at the rookie. He has a point. As the boss you could command him to do it, but that would be abuse of power. But as a friend you could ask him, but both of us know your pride, Joe. Plus, Anthony would tell Samara just to see her fuss at you. Michael added. Why would you want her to fuss at me, man? Joseph became defensive. Because she is my boss's boss. It is fun when you get hollered at instead of us. Anthony chuckled. When have I ever fussed or hollered at you? Joe blinked in annoyance. Anthony perked up and tilted his head. He glanced at Michael, smiling. Michael was also smiling. It was funny to watch Joe get his feathers ruffled. It was so easy to get his little Hispanic self flustered. When have you not? Heck, the first day I met you called me Will Smith and something else in Spanish. You mumble in Spanish all the time, which I have yet to learn. Also, that time when we were after that vampire with a dumb modern name. What was his name again? Anthony snapped his fingers trying to remember. Adam. Michael added in. Don't help him. Joe growled. Yeah. Adam. Anthony pursed his lips and pointed at Mike. Don't remind me of O'Grady and his disaster of an arrest. Joe facepalmed. You got pissed at me for running him down and almost exposing him to sunlight. Anthony crossed his arms in annoyance. Yes, because we needed him alive. See, that is your problem. You are still a rookie. This isn't the police department. We are dealing with creatures who are stronger and have different makeups. Some vampires can't be exposed to sunlight or they go puff in smoke. Keeping him alive was more important than getting him, maybe, but that idiot. Surprised he lasted that long. He is the stupidest vampire I have ever met. Anthony added. Joseph and Anthony continued to argue back and forth as Michael just shook his head and listened. At least Joe had someone else to argue with now instead of him. As the three stood in the middle of the wrecked bar with the dead creature behind them, the sheriff of the small town finally showed up. The three didn't notice the sheriff until he yelled to get their attention. Hey! The sheriff yelled again as the three grew silent and turned to face him and his few deputies. A white guy, a black guy, and a Mexican walk into a bar. The sheriff spoke as he glanced at the destruction. Glass was shattered and flung around. The pool tables were overturned, and the tables and stools flung across the room. A racist sheriff walks in behind them and the point. Anthony spoke up with an attitude. Joe gave Anthony a glare to get him to shut up. And the point is, you three caused more damage than that thing. The sheriff adjusted his hat and placed his hands on his waist. The sheriff was a very blunt and stern person. He stood around Michael height at 6'3", but he was of a hefty build. He was in his late 40s, and the judge thought he was kind of young to be the sheriff. Anthony and Joseph crossed their arms with the same attitude, and both were about to let the sheriff have it, but the older woman from behind the bar, who was also the owner, stood up. Her hands were still clutching the phone. The woman started to fuss and try to explain what was going on. The sheriff, Sheriff Parks. These idiots chased that thing into my bar. It was like a bull in a china shop. Look at this place. It is practically ruined. How am I going to pay for this damage?" she screamed. The sheriff had enough and hollered at the woman to shut up. "Marge, I get called down here at least once a week. I could care less what happened to your bar, but you have insurance to fix this rat hole, so shut up." He then turned his attention to the three men. While everyone's attention was on Joe, Mike and Anthony, the older man who was at the bar picked up his beer again and tried to sneak out. The sheriff rolled his eyes and grumbled to himself, "Ethan, get drunk Pete before he gets into his car." Sheriff Parks ordered his deputy to follow the old man known around town as Drunk Pete. The deputy nodded and chased after Pete. The sheriff then walked into the bar and toward the three men. Joseph unfolded his arm and moved his jacket to show the sheriff his gun and badge. Sheriff Parks picked up an overturned chair and took a seat. He removed his hat and ran a hand through his brown hair before letting out a deep sigh. "This is the last thing I want, is the government swarming my town." He glanced up at Joseph. He knew Joseph was fed by his suit he wore. Even if it was a bit shabby now from the fight, it was still a suit. Anthony wore BDUs and a tactical combat shirt, all black. The judge was the only one dressed in civilian clothes with a button-down short-sleeve shirt, which was opened and exposing his under t-shirt and khakis. "I'm with a special division that specializes in the supernatural. Special Agent Joseph Antonello. And this is Agent Anthony Shepard and Judge Michael Bryce." Joe swallowed his pride and did his best to act professional. "I didn't know judges went on cases like this." The sheriff added in, "I'm not that kind of judge." Mike replied, "Sheriff, we are not here to step on anyone's toes or move in. We had word of this creature and tracked it down to remove it. That is all." Joe explained. "I see." The sheriff paused and pointed to the goat man. "That isn't the only thing that has been causing trouble around here. I have even bigger problems, but not sure who to go to about them, or if anyone would believe me. This is a small town. The wineries and tourists keep this place afloat, but lately there has been a disturbance. People's lives and livelihoods are at risk, and I feel helpless." The sheriff's eyes drifted between the men and then down at the creature. He did not know why he was telling these men his problems, but something in him made him want to confess. "The rise of the supernatural is the reason my branch was formed. It is also the reason the judges joined us and aided us in taking down these creatures that threaten people. My team and I are here to help Sheriff, not to overtake." The sheriff watches the hat in his hand as he rotates it a few times. He then placed it on his head and stood up slowly. "How do I know I can trust you? How do I know you are not the ones working for this threat?" The others had no idea what the sheriff was talking about. Anthony had a confused face on as he watched between the others. "Sheriff, I honestly have no clue what you are talking about. Like I said, we are here for this goat man, but if there is anything else we can help you with, I would be happy to do so." Joseph spoke with a sincere tone, and the sheriff picked up on it. The sheriff nodded and held out his hand to shake Joe's. "Sheriff Jason Parks. Welcome to Fredericksburg." The sheriff still had his stern demeanor about him, but it was a bit more friendly than the first encounter. The agent took his hand firmly. "May we come by your office to explain more in depth about our department, and so you can tell us the trouble you are having?" Joseph asked as he let his hand go. "Sure. Follow me." The sheriff went to turn but stopped. "Oh, what about that thing?" Jason asked. "The Cowd has a special team that does cleanup, no worries, sir," the judge explained. "The Cowd?" Jason rose a brow. "Yes. It is the council of judges that oversee the other judges. I will explain more when we arrive at your office, Sheriff. Michael spoke in a pleasant manner. Jason nodded and pointed to his other deputy. Go get a statement from Marge so she can file with her insurance. Wait for his people to arrive, he commanded. The deputy hopped to his duties while the sheriff walked out the bar. Joe, Anthony, and Mike followed him outside. Follow me. Jason walked to his squad car and waited for the others to get into their own vehicles before driving off to the office. Chapter 2. The sheriff led the three men into his office and closed the door. Anthony stood along the back wall beside the door as Joseph and Mike sat in front of the desk. Jason took a seat and glanced over at each man. Okay. Please explain this to me more. The judges, the cowed, and this division of the black files. The sheriff leaned back in his chair and waited. Michael went first. He explained everything about himself and the other judges. He explained the cowed and the reason for joining the FBI. Joe then explained how the division was formed and how he became leader in the Austin division. It was now turn for Jason to tell the others the problems he was having in his town. The long pause let them know he was still reluctant to share this. Things started when Mr. Richmond Mand and his banks rolled into town. He bought up all the local branches you see and raised interest on people's accounts. He started buying up land and running people off. If not with his goons, with his creatures. I heard a rumor, and recently saw this with my own eyes, that he recently set up fracking locations. Fracking for oil causes runoff and water pollution. This has caused a lot of the wineries' crops to fail. The town is going under, and I believe he is doing this on purpose. He holds the loans so when people cannot pay their bills and mortgage, he and his bank will seize the land and give it to the Rosses. The Rosses are the oil tycoons. I'm sure you have heard of them. Jason looked over at Joseph. Yes, they are like the fictional Carringtons in that Dynasty TV show. Joseph added. This Mr. Mand, does he wear old Southern gentleman garb and have a stupid accent? Like the KFC colonel? Mike asked. Yeah. Why? Jason asked. Or yes. Mammon. An old fallen angel. Let me bring up his file. The judge pulled out his phone and opened the crowd's app on his phone. They recently made the system for logging in info into an app that the judges could pull up when in the field. He then began to read everything out loud. Mammon, class. Fallen angel, owner of various banks across the world. Mammon in the New Testament of the Bible is commonly thought to mean money, material wealth, or any entity that promises wealth and is associated with the greedy pursuit of gain. The Gospel of Matthew and the Gospel of Luke both quote Jesus using the word in a phrase often rendered in English as, "You cannot serve both God and mammon." The fallen angel Mammon, lay not up for yourselves treasures upon earth, where moth and rust doth corrupt, and where thieves break through and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust doth corrupt, and where thieves do not break through nor steal. For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. No man can serve two masters. For either he will hate the one and love the other, or else he will hold to the one and despise the other. Ye cannot serve God and mammon. Matthew 6:19-21, 24. On God's instruction, Gideon destroyed the town's altar to Baal, and the symbol of the goddess Asherah beside it, receiving the byname of Jerubbaal from his father. Therefore, on that day he, Joash, called him Jerubbaal, saying, Let Baal plead against him, because he hath thrown down his altar. Judges 6:32. There was peace in Israel for 40 years during the life of Gideon. As soon as Gideon died of old age, the Israelites again turned to worship the false god Baal-berith, and ignored the family of Gideon. Ever since Mammon hated the line of Gideon, the fallen angel makes it his mission to destroy anyone related to the judge. In the Middle Ages it was often personified and sometimes included in the 7 princes of hell. Mammon in Hebrew means money. The word was adopted to modern Hebrew to mean wealth. In the 4th century, Cyprian and Jerome relate Mammon to greed, and greed as an evil master that enslaves, and John Chrysostom even personifies Mammon as greed. During the Middle Ages, Mammon was commonly personified as the demon of wealth and greed. Albert Barnes, in his notes on the New Testament, states that Mammon was a Syriac word for an idol, worshipped as the god of riches, like Plutus among the Greeks, but he cited no authority for the statement. Milton's Paradise Lost describes a fallen angel who values earthly treasure over all other things. Later occultist writings such as Jacques Collin de Plancy's Dictionnaire Infernal describe Mammon as hell's ambassador to England. For Thomas Carlyle, in Past and Present, the gospel of Mammonism simply became a metaphoric personification for the materialist spirit of the 19th century. Under the influence of the social gospel movement, American populists, progressives and muckrakers, during the generation of 1880 to 1925, used Mammon with specific reference to the consolidated wealth and power of the banking and corporate institutions headquartered on Wall Street and their predacious activities nationwide. The truth was, this fallen angel ran amok in the old world. Often kings and politicians came to Mammon for wealth and status. They would sign their family and legacy over to the fallen angel for material wealth and status. In 1912, Mammon made his departure to start his hold on America. He journeyed on the Titanic to America and of course survived the sinking. He also saved a female passenger, Mullet. Mammon made Mullet his associate in return for her life. The fallen angel turned the female into a siren, and the woman serves her master with love and devotion to this day. This devil owns many banks and businesses in New York along Wall Street. The first Texas oil boom arrived in June 1894, when the Corsicana oil field was discovered by a drilling contractor hired by the city to find water. The Nacogdoches oil field remained the first and oldest in Texas, and as late as 1941 still recorded production of 8 barrels a day from 40 wells. Mammon saw his opportunity to turn this black goo into gold. Mammon traveled from New York to Texas in the 1920s to set up shop and expand his empire of greed. Oil has its hold on the world today. Every industry critically depends upon it. Over the centuries, countries still go to war over this decaying matter. Only the fallen angel could have set up so much wealth over such an item. The fallen angel and his minions whispered the ideas to humans to evolve this black substance and to lift it up almost in worship. Mammon gave the Rosses family their start in this industry. A down-on-his-luck businessman, Jesse Wyatt. Jesse practically sold his soul and his future family members to Mammon. If they pledged themselves to the fallen one and world for him, he promised them wealth and prestige. Recently, the idea of fracking entered the minds of Wyatt Rosses. The current leader of the family, Wyatt Rosses, began the pursuit of fracking in the mid-80s into the 90s. Recently it has kicked off due to the high demand for oil. Fracking allows drilling firms to access difficult-to-reach resources of oil and gas. In the United States, it has significantly boosted domestic oil production and driven down gas prices. Fracking is a hotly debated environmental and political issue. Advocates insist it is a safe and economical source of clean energy. Critics, however, claim fracking can destroy drinking water supplies, pollute the air, contribute to the greenhouse gases that cause global warming, and trigger earthquakes. So, they could help him own and buy up the land and own the people. The Rosses are under the watch of not only the FBI and environmental agencies, but also the judges. Oil is not the only thing this devil and family seems to be unleashing. Also, the buying up and destruction of land is a big issue, along with fraud and many people's lives and livelihoods destroyed. No associates are as follows: Merlet, class, siren, maker, fallen angel Mammon. Merlet was born in the 1800s to a poor family in London. After the death of her father, her mother sold the 10-year-old to a local whorehouse where she would work. It was not until the discovery of her voice did things get a bit easier when the madam made her second in charge. On her 23rd birthday, Merlet meets a con man named Jackson. The two become a thing, and after the death of the madam, Jackson had proposed a marriage. The main reason was so they two could own the property and whorehouse. Merlet agrees to in order to not have the women thrown out on the street. Soon after, Merlet learns of most of his ways and cons. Jackson sweet talks his way to her heart once more, asking her to accompany him to his home in America. There he would make her a star with her voice and no more whoring. She falls for his sweet words again, blinded by love. The trip on the Titanic was a rough one, but became even rougher when she found another girl on her husband. He promised the gal the same thing and her heart broke. She sang on the stage even as the water rushed in. Her heart turned cold as the waters. A fallen angel called Mammon brought Merlet back to life as a siren. Someone to sing and lure people, steal their souls, and give it to her fallen master. Sirens dislike men, and they will kill them every chance that they get. Sirens are also masters at manipulating minds and manipulating their own and others' emotions. With their song they can make any male do anything the siren wishes them to do. With the sirens, mythology has created a physical personification of the danger of falling for a beautiful woman. As any man knows, beautiful women can be dangerous. In Greek mythology, some beautiful women can be straight up deadly. The sirens of Greek mythology began specifically as a group of creatures who looked like beautiful women, but were man-eating beasts. They sat on the shore and sang with voices so seductive and compelling that anyone who heard their song became absolutely mesmerized with them. So mesmerized, in fact, that they became obsessed with reaching the shore to get closer to the sound, and then the sirens would eat them. The term siren is used both in ancient and modern mythology, as well as in modern language in general, to describe something that is simultaneously dangerous and compelling. In later myths and legends, any creature that lured a man in only to cause harm might be considered a siren in the general context of the term. With the original Greek sirens, mythology depicts these creatures as beautiful women with angelic wings who play their lutes and sing. They were aloof and did not make eye contact with their victims, which made them seem all the more innocent and mysterious. Different versions of siren mythology have them as having mostly bird-like bodies with the heads of women, or sometimes they had the torso of a woman and the tail of a fish. Both versions are likely confusing the sirens with harpies and mermaids, respectively. Sirens are not mermaid or harpies. Sirens are evil beings that are relatives of fairies, harpies, succubus, and gorgons. Sirens have a voice that is irresistible to men. They can vocally command most males to do anything against their will. Some exclude young children, powerful beings such as fallen angels, or even some judges trained in defense against such attacks. Wyatt Rosses, class. Human. Wyatt Rosses is the youngest out of children born to Jesse Wyatt. The eldest was Faye Rosses, and the second born was James Rosses. The family's home sat in the countryside right outside of Dallas, Texas. The Rosses were surrounded by wealth and constant eyes from the outside world. Scandals and headlines in the papers were a constant and norm for the family. The only thing hidden was the fact they served a fallen angel and practiced the occult often. Wyatt was the only one out of his siblings to take the family business seriously. Faye was more of a diva and loved the limelight, while James was a bit of a rebel. When James died due to his rebellious ways, Jesse brought Wyatt under his wings to train him to take over the family business. Wyatt pledged himself to the family, his father and the fallen angel Mammon. Wyatt married his first wife Tina in the 70s. A few years later she gave birth to a son, Conway. Tina died a few years after due to cancer. 5 years later Wyatt remarried Beth Richard. It was more out of business than love. Beth was a Creole woman from a prominent family in New Orleans. The Richard and Rosses had a long-standing business partnership, and when Wyatt married Beth, it gave them the chance to merge the business. The Richards owned many drilling companies throughout Louisiana and the South. They also had their own fallen angel Mephistopheles, who they answered to. Meph owned the family but allowed the merger. The two fallen angels agreed on the business. 2 years into the marriage Diana was born. Another 3 years later Harry was born. However, the marriage did not last. The business remained merged, but the two divorced. Both Wyatt and Beth were unfaithful, but the fact that over time they started to hate each other was the cause for the divorce. Wyatt is now married to a young actress from California named Betty. Betty is rarely at the family home due to her career, and the fact she only married Wyatt for his money. A business tycoon and mastermind, Wyatt's first love is his business. He will do anything to protect his company's and family name, even if it means partaking in illegal activity. He often uses his influence and position of power to perpetuate his interests. Wyatt is ruthless in business, and even more ruthless in his personal life. When Wyatt claims someone as a member of his family, they are protected and given anything they could ever desire. The whole motto of "We don't kill family" was born from his creed. He obtained this from Jesse, however Conway does not agree with this motto. Conway Ross's class. Human. Conway is the firstborn son to Wyatt and Tina Rosses. Tina was Wyatt's first marriage and his only love. Conway's mother died when he was 5 years old due to cancer. This affected Conway greatly, and his only source for nurture disappeared. His father was a rough and hard to get along with. The young boy was on his own a lot, and for attention he would act out. Conway saw how his father acted and how Wyatt put business in front of even family. This made the boy grow into a cold and rebellious teenager. Wyatt noticed the rebel spirit in Conway. The same was Wyatt's brother James. Wyatt feared the rebellion would cause Conway's death, much like his brother. Wyatt had Conway sent to a military school to hopefully get some discipline in him. Not only did it teach Conway manners, but it taught him how to fight and turn his anger into ambition. When he graduated military school, he enlisted in the army. Conway served for 4 years. He came back sharpened and disciplined. It was what Wyatt wanted, but Conway would not be deceived by his father. Conway knew now he had to play the same games as his father and the rest of his family, if he was to survive in their cutthroat family. However, Conway wanted to make his own way in life. He would still make sure to have a hand in the family business, but Conway wanted something to call his own. That is why he decided to run for a congressman seat. Conway knew of the occult practices his family did behind closed doors, but he did not quite understand too much about it until he finally met the family devil/fallen angel. Conway and his other siblings got along most times, but they did have their spats. Sometimes they would fight out of pure boredom. A rich family where everything was handed to them, arguments were a pastime to them. Harry, a doctor and the youngest of the 3, wanted nothing to do with the family half the time. He spent most of his time with Doctors Without Borders. Conway and Diana, however, spent plenty of time together. Their relationship as siblings were rocky. Diana wanted to be head of the family, but it was Conway that would take the role. The reason is because he was the firstborn. It upset her so much how he really did not want anything to do with the main business of the family, but Wyatt picked Conway over her. Diana was there giving her all to the family. Currently Conway is running for second term as congressman. Each representative is elected to a 2-year term serving the people of a specific congressional district. Among other duties, representatives introduce bills and resolutions, offer amendments, and serve on committees. This would greatly aid in the family. This was the only reason Wyatt agreed for Conway to pursue this position, but he instilled in him that the family and the family business came first. He is engaged to Natalia Rozanov, but marriage and comment in that area meant nothing to him. Just like his father, he was all business. Plus, the family had money to throw around to hide their sins. He was only engaged to Nat because of a deal he and the Russian mob was cooking up. She was a law student and would help his career, while Conway would help the Russians with real estate in the area. To help cope with everything, and to numb his soul even more, Conway turned to drugs. Cocaine was his drug of choice. Calliope Bianchini, a ballerina and mobster's daughter, often shared his bed. She also introduced him to her other boyfriend, a drug dealer named Trevor Hoffman. Conway is already aware of Trevor due to his old dealer Denny. Trevor sold to high-class families and clubs. He became Conway's personal dealer permanently. Conway Rosses is currently 42 years old. He is Caucasian, standing 6'2". The congressman is in great physical shape, and he kept up his army training even when he left. He has sandy blonde hair that he keeps short and hazel-color eyes. He often wears a straight stone-cold face unless he is in public. He puts on his charm to get votes and people to see his point of view. He is very manipulative, ambitious, and cold-blooded just like his father. Since he works for Mammon, he supports the supernatural community and wants more relaxed rules and regulations. Diana Ross's class. Human. Diana is the second legitimate daughter born to Wyatt Rosses from his second marriage to Beth Richard. Her mother was a black Creole wealthy woman from New Orleans, whose parents owned a drilling company. Beth Richard and her brother Darren Richard not only own many companies, but they also work for Meth due to bad debt. Meth took over the business to help them get out of going under. Diana is next in line, and currently is part owner of the Rosses Oil Company. She also has shares in the drilling company as well as other companies both Rosses and Richards acquired. Despite the scandals, secrets, and lies, the two families decided it was better to stick it out and work together than apart. Even after Beth's divorce from Wyatt, the two children were a guarantee of the merger. Unlike her father, Diana is more compassionate and has a heart, but do not take that for weakness. She is strong, cunning, tough as nails. She may not be as cruel as her father, but she takes no bull. Out of the other siblings, she is the most moral. The business is cutthroat and dirty, but Diana makes sure she does things by the law and by the books. The reason being, so when the others fail and become locked up, she will be the head and in charge. Diana avoids the family soap operas as much as possible, but her and Wyatt get in arguments quite often. Oftentimes she is the brunt of them, being a widow and barren, but Diana is clever and avoids the silly catfights. Words are her weapons. After the death of her husband 3 years ago, it left her not only devastated but alone. The two were not romantically in love, but were more friends and companions. Diana married him to please her father and help the family because he was a lawyer. After his death, her father wanted her to marry another one of his business partners as a deal, and she refused. If she ever married again, it would be for love, not gain. In punishment, he sent her to Galveston to run the debt-filled offices. He gave her the crappy jobs to try and save failing sub-business related to the family. Save she did. Diana is not a quitter. Her quick temper, mouth, and wit saved many of the offshore companies. Many men owe her their lives and families. Without her they would have been homeless. Diana is barren. She could never conceive a child, and felt her husband and father always condemned her for it. A few months in Galveston, Diana picked up a young black girl from a waitress job, Jackie, who showed great potential. The orphan never finished high school and had been working since she was 12. She lives with the heiress in her new mansion in Galveston, Texas. Diana is raising the young girl of 19 as a daughter almost. She also hopes to shape and mold her into the next one in line for her business. Jackie's adoptive papers will be finished in a few months, and she will be taking on the Rosas name and dynasty. At first Diana, her security team and other employees were stuck almost living out of camp conditions after a major hurricane had hit, but this did not stop Diana. Time after time, even though she was knocked to the bottom, she rose to the top. Diana is currently dating her head of security, William Mee. Diana is currently 36-year-old. She stands at 5'4" and has amber and tannish color skin with soft brown eyes. Her hair is black and normally wears it wavy at shoulder length. Her dress style is sophisticated with pantsuits and dresses. Her sense of style is well known, and she is often featured in magazines for not only her style, but her success in her field. Since she was a teenager, Diana has had close contact with Mammon. She does small jobs for him here and there in order to gain favor. She hopes one day he will allow her to take over the business, since Conway insists on being a congressman. William Mee, class, fee, species, ice elemental. William is a 45-year-old ice elemental fee from Chicago. He had worked for Mephistopheles while the fallen angel was in town. Meph was so impressed by Will's dedication to his job, he accompanied the fallen angel back to New Orleans. Eventually Meph assigned Will to be Diana's personal bodyguard. Mammon allows this. He knew Meph wanted an inside man to make sure Mammon was sticking to his side of the deal. William is 6 feet tall with pale skin and dark brown hair. When using his ice powers, his skin can go to an icy glitter and his hair white. His normal eyes are brown but turn blue when he uses his ice powers. His allegiance is to Meph, Mammon, and above all his love Diana. Harry Rosses, class, human. Harry Rosses is the third born to Wyatt and his second wife Beth Richard. Being the baby, Harry got away with a lot of things. Harry often had a flair for the dramatics, and was often the cause of a lot of the fights that occurred in the family home. When he grew older, Harry decided to take things a bit more serious. He decided to go to medical college to become a doctor. Although Harry does have some say in the company and a bit of knowledge in the area, he decided he would rather make his own way. Much like Conway, he wanted to make his own name to fame and be out from under his father Wyatt. Harry just wanted his father's money rather than his time and attention. Harry is very vain and has a knack for getting in trouble with ladies. One incident, Wyatt had to cover up the death of a high-class call girl that overdosed on medication written by Harry. For this mistake, Harry had to go off to Africa. Wyatt wanted Harry to do penance and reclaim his and the family's name by doing Doctors Without Borders. Harry is a womanizer and takes care in his look. The Doctor is 6 foot tall, slender built with light chestnut color skin close to his sister. His eyes, however, are blue. He is the poster child for a spoiled rich brat and flaunts his wealth. Harry also acts very entitled and can throw a fit if he does not get what he wants. Obviously the crowd has a lot on this Mammon and the Rosses. It will help us start a case on them. Anthony replied, I agree. We need to head back to Austin and open a case file. If you know or see anything else, Sheriff, let us know. We will help you save this city. Joseph nodded. All I know is the Rosses just built a large house outside of town. Mammon has been spotted there quite a lot lately. Jason added, Can you put any of your men to watch him? Mike asked. I can try. Our department is small, and we are losing funding. Jason explained. Joe stood up and handed him his business card. Stay in touch. As soon as I get back to the office, I promise we will start this case. Joe held out his hand and shook Jason's hand. Mike and Anthony shook the sheriff's hand before leaving as well. Chapter 3. Dallas. TV screens in the large Ross's mansion blare the news of the death of Wyatt Rosses in every room. Conway was in his father's office watching. He stood behind the large desk drinking whiskey as he watched the news channels cover the life and death of the oil tycoon. It was reported as a heart attack, but in reality, Wyatt owed his life to the fallen angel Mammon. In exchange for wealth and business, he gave the remaining years of his life to the fallen angel. When he was too old to benefit the angel, Mammon took his life. Conway was already in 3 glasses of whiskey before 9 o'clock, but this was a normal thing for him. He could care less his father died. Over the last year the two had argued back and forth about Conway's choices to join with the Russian mob. Wyatt wanted nothing to do with them, but Conway had no choice. 2 years ago, Conway was in debt with a Russian drug dealer. Mr. Lev Solonik, a boss in the Russian mafia, offered him a way out of his debts. The mob would invest in Conway's career as a congressman. In exchange, Conway would supply territory or real estate for the Russians. The Russians gained a congressman in their back pocket, while Conway gained support and a way to have his vices. The Russians would also supply the politician with a wife. Natalia was a young beauty, having the features of a model with pale skin and fiery red hair. Natalia became his fiancée, but she was hardly around. She was still in law school. As part of the deal with the Russians, Nat, niece to one of the bosses, was to represent Conway on his legal team. The two shared a bed, but Conway did not feel anything for her. He was a womanizer and treated Natalia poorly. Her presence was more for show to the camera or for a drunken night fling. Nat was quiet and shy, and had the feeling Conway did not like her much. The young Russian also did not care for the congressman. He was incredibly attractive, but he was cruel. The only reason she stayed was due to her family forcing her. Conway downed the last of the amber liquid before setting the glass on the desk. He retrieved his phone from his pocket to check the hundreds of messages sent to him. Most giving their condolences. Others of lawyers wanted to set up meetings about the companies they owned. His face was so buried in his phone he did not notice Mammon or Richmond Mand enter the office. He wore a 3-piece suit that was very dated. It looked as if he walked off an old-time Civil War plantation. His dark blonde hair was parted on the side and slicked back. His goatee was trimmed and had a point at the end. He almost looked like an evil KFC Colonel Sanders. Along with his get-up, he had the accent and charm of a southern gentleman to go with it. Mammon came to Conway once Wyatt died to seal a deal with the eldest son of the family. He would bless him as head of the family, but Conway needed to make sure the family's oil business continued. Evening, Conway. He smiled, revealing yellow teeth. Conway looked up and kept a stone face as he looked over Mammon. Conway knew very well who Mammon was and why he was there. He knew the story of how his grandfather took up a contract with these fallen angels, and his father carried on the tradition. Now, Mammon was there for him. All his life he was raised around the occult stuff. He dabbled in it a bit, but never took it seriously. Now Conway would have to. He honestly did not want anything to do with the oil business, but he did however want the cash that came with it. Conway's hazel eyes glanced down at his phone again before putting it away. He then turned his attention back at Mammon. "I suppose you are here for business?" Conway asked. "Of course I am, dear boy. I would also ask how you are faring after the recent demise of your father, but we both know you could care less of what happened to dear Ole Wyatt." He spoke with an accent and slowly pronounced his words in almost an old Georgian Southern gent. "Tell me something. If you are as old as you say you are, why the old Southern garb?" Conway asked. He thought it ridiculous. "You rate me in a loin cloth and sandals." Mammon chuckled. "I rather like the old Western days. It was the beginning of the greed of this great nation, and I have to say I am a sucker for nostalgia." Mammon kept a smile on his face as he spoke to the boy. Most fear and trembled before him, but not Conway. The fallen angel found it interesting. Conway had many vices. Drugs, women, power, but the core to them all was wealth. Mammon dealt in wealth, he was the god of it. This man's greed would feed Mammon's machine and power. "So, Mr. Conway, I do believe you wish to stay in the business of your father and family, correct?" Mammon asked. "Not particularly. You know I am a congressman and currently on the campaign trail to my second term in office." "Yes, I do know of this. I also know the riches of your family help you run that company. The riches that come from the oil business and other smaller businesses. Also, the contribution to my banks and loan. You know of all this, I am sure. I am also sure that it is a custom for the firstborn to take on the head of the household." Mammon explained. He was backing Conway into a corner, and Conway did not like it. He did his best to remain calm and not lash out. Mammon picked up on this as he watched Conway's jaw clench. "However, what if we can both get what we want? You name only the head of the business, so that you can continue your quest for politics, and I appoint another to run the business alongside you. Whatever you think will work. Just as long as I can focus on my own business as a congressman." Conway would agree if he would win the Congress seat. Mammon thought it was an exceptionally good idea. "Of course, a man in your position is of great use to me. I would suggest Diana take up the head of the board of the Ross's oil companies." Mammon added. Diana, Conway's half-sister, would help on the oil business side, while Conway would become a congressman. Having power in the government would be a great asset to the family, and Mammon, on top of the devotion of the sister, would do Mammon great. Wyatt's kids never really pledged themselves to the fallen one when they came of age, so legally he did not own them. This would be a great opportunity to get the pledge and to gather their souls to himself, along with their worship and devotion. He knew Diana would give this, being she wanted to run this company for some time. However, Conway was a bit of a renegade. Getting his worship would be harder but not impossible. Mammon paced around the room looking at various things Wyatt had in there. He stopped and turned to Conway. "However, some things must be cleaned up before I push for your re-election. Make sure your nose and business are clean. Make sure your past is neatly buried and taken care of. Last thing we need is your past mistakes rearing their ugly head. I can handle the Russians, but anything else needs to be dealt with." Conway thought long and hard. He could not think of anything offhand that could expose or hurt his upcoming election. Make sure to go over the family expenses as well. Brides, debts, anything. Mammon added. Then it hit Conway. Before he could reply, Diana, Conway's sister, walked in and stood beside Mammon. "Did I miss the meeting?" She raised a brow with an attitude. Diana crossed her arms and glared at Conway. Diana had every right to be there as Conway. Diana did more for the business than Conway, and she wanted to be in charge. It was not fair Mammon would pick him to be the leader of the family. Diana made more effort and gave all her time and devotion to this business, while Conway went play soldier boy and politician. The two had the same father, but different mothers. It was plain due to the different skin tones they had, but Diana was never looked down on. She was universally loved and respected by all. It was just tradition for the firstborn to be the leader, and she was second-born. Calm down, Diana. This is not an official board meeting. Conway scolded. No, but it is a meeting with the real person in charge. The lord of the family. She had more respect for Mammon than Conway, and Mammon smiled. He turned to her and held out his hand. Greeting, madam. Diana placed her hand on his and kept her eyes down in respect as she was taught. Mammon kissed her hand lightly and smiled. He ran his pale fingers over her tannish color skin, taking in the scent of coconut and vanilla. Conway rolled his eyes and walked to pour himself another drink. We were just discussing how Conway would be in charge of the family, but you, my dear, can run this oil business. Mammon explains. My dark lord, I am honored you would consider me. Of course, my dear. You have shown such devotion to the business, and I hope to gain the same devotion to myself. Mammon let her hand go as he placed his own in his suit pocket. Conway poured him a drink and downed it right away. Diana turned to see her brother practically getting drunk. I do not think that this would be a good look for the press, Conway. She was right, and Conway placed the bottle down with a grumble. We were just discussing if there was anything that would come up during his election to cause problems. Mammon reminded Conway. There is one thing. He turned to face the two. Diana took a seat in front of the desk, but turned to face Conway. Mammon stood and waited for Conway to continue. Our father has been paying for a girl in Mexico to live. As soon as Conway mentioned this, Diana's eyes went wide. Oh, I remember that. He said we were to forget about her and keep our mouth shut about the whole situation. Diana glanced up at Mammon. I hit our old cook and his wife by accident one day. I was high, texting and driving home late one night. I overcorrected and slammed headfirst into their car. Dad shipped their adopted daughter off to Mexico and paid for her silence about the whole thing. In return for her silence, Dad promised to support her. It took a lot of convincing, but Brea finally agreed. I remember her and her parents. They were good people. I never understood why Dad shipped her off, because he knew she would sue and get the law involved. It would have tarnished our name and my career. He also said killing her wasn't an option, which I never understood. Only two options with Dad. Payoffs or death. Diana rolled her eyes. What else could he do? Brea had no dirt on her. She was clean-cut. He had no dirt on the orphan, so he had to ship her off. Conway added. So, what do we do now? Diana asked. Kill her. Conway spoke bluntly. Diana's face twisted. No, why? She has dirt on her now. She has been living on the family's money. Diana protested. Why do you care, Diana? Plus, I am not going to continue to pay for her lifestyle. People can track that money down and uncover what I did. Conway argued. The two siblings argue back and forth while Mammon watches on. Whatever. Diana finally said. I have enough on my plate while trying to manage the family businesses. Mom's drilling company and Dad's oil. Meanwhile, Harry, our baby brother, is away in Africa. It is as if he wants nothing to do with the company either. Is he even coming for Dad's funeral? Diana asked. I have no clue. I know Betty will be there for her check. Conway snorted. Diana rolled her eyes. Betty was their stepmother that was around their age. She was a high-maintenance actress who did not even live at the family home in Dallas. She lived in California in a house Wyatt bought her. Hopefully, it will be the last we see of her. Diana spat out in disgust. I am sure the cash cow is dead and we have nothing for her. Conway walked around and sat behind the desk. Mammon finally spoke up after listening to everything. I will take my leave. It seems I need to make some arrangements. You two do need to visit me when you are ready to pledge yourself. After, I will make sure everything settles as spoken here today. Mammon then teleported out of the room. A knock broke the silence between the siblings. Conway yelled for whoever was knocking to enter. A tall, thin man with pale skin and dark hair walked in. He was wearing a well-tailored suit as he entered silently. I placed your luggage in your room. He spoke to Diana. Thank you, William. She responded. You two a thing? Conway asked. Yes, and I will be staying in the mansion until the funeral is over. After that I will take my leave back to Galveston. Diana stood up and walked to William. William was Diana's boyfriend and head of security. I just built a place outside of Fredericksburg. So, it does not matter to me if you stay here or not. White kicked you out, not me. Conway shrugged. I would rather be in Galveston. Too many bad memories here, but I am only staying for the arrangement and such. I doubt I will move back in here. Diana's eyes wandered the office in disgust. I wish I could burn the place down, but I doubt Mammon would allow it. Conway shrugged. Is the basement still filled with that altar and the occult stuff? Diana asked. Honestly, I have no clue. I have not had a chance to go over my emails, let alone a tour of our old home. Conway confesses. Speaking of time, I need to get back to business. Like you, I have things to settle before the shark lawyers descend on us. And with that Diana turned and walked out. William nodded to Conway silently and followed her out. Conway then turned his attention to the TV that was still on. Chapter 4, Mexico. A small older Mexican woman came from the back of the store holding a tray of new plants. She sat them down beside the younger female who was in her 30s. The woman was in the main center of the garden center watering the plants, singing to herself. The woman wore a smile as she listened to music through her earbuds and moved slowly to the music, not noticing the older woman. The old Mexican lady reached up and tapped on her shoulder lightly. Brea. She called out, trying to get her attention. Brea took her headphones off and set them around her neck. Her tight dark ringlet curls sat above her shoulders and bounced when she moved. Brea's tawny skin color glowed almost bronze in the setting sun, as a wide smile formed on her face. Sigh, Senora? She asked. The older woman started to ramble in Spanish, but Brea had to stop her. I am not as fluent just yet. Brea chuckled a bit. The woman patted her shoulder and spoke in broken English and Spanish for her. We have a new shipment of plants in the back. Can you finish putting them out and water them before you leave for the day? She asked. Brea nodded and responded in Spanish. You are getting better. Keep practicing. The older woman chuckled. Thanks to your daughter. Otherwise I would still be clueless on how to speak or write in Spanish. Brea smiled warmly, looking down at the older woman. Christina is always so eager to help, and so are you. I am so glad you and she became friends. You are a godsend to us and the store. The older woman laughed and turned to hobble back into the store. Brea sat the water hose down and made her way to the back of the store. She had been working at the small garden and landscape store for about 2 years now. Her best friend Christina asked her to take her place at the family-run store. Christina had other plans in life other than to work in the store her whole life. Christina was going to college to be a teacher, and Brea, who did not really have a job, did not mind. Brea met Christina at a local restaurant when she moved to Mexico. Brea was having trouble ordering her food in Spanish, and Christina helped. Ever since then the two had been close friends. Although her time in Mexico was a bit of a struggle, Brea was used to the hard life. Brea Cooper was adopted by Wilfred and Nicole Cooper, a Filipino couple from Dallas, Texas. Wilfred was head chef at the Ross's household, and Nicole worked as a personal trainer to Mrs. Faye Ross's, Wyatt's sister. The Coopers were immigrants from Manila and worked hard their whole life. When they adopted Brea, Nicole became a stay-at-home mother and instilled in Brea strict values. Such values as the fact money does not make a person important, and how you must work hard for what you want. The Coopers saw how the Rosses acted, and they did not want their own child to become like them. Their baby girl grew up happily and healthily. Much like her parents, Brea is an optimist at heart and tries her best to see the good in people. As a teen, she took karate as well as choir in high school. Brea was bullied in high school. Brea was bullied for the fact she was adopted, and her parents could not afford all the name brand clothes, much like the other rich kids that attended the school. The Coopers did their best to supply Brea with a good education by sending her to a private school, but the funds often were stretched. Brea did not mind she didn't have fancy clothes or shoes. She was grateful to have them and a family that loved her. After Brea got into her first fight, Brea signed up for karate. She thought the karate classes would help, but the very boy bullying her was in the karate class. Brea soon dropped out due to this and focused on choir. The girl had a beautiful voice and a talent for music. However, Brea put her singing on hold when she graduated. The young woman did not know exactly what she wanted to do in life, but she knew singing wasn't something she could pay the bills with. Brea worked 2 jobs to try and save for college. Her day job was at a small hardware store, while her night job was singing and waitressing at the local bar and grill. Brea had no clue exactly what kind of career she wanted to go for, but Brea knew she needed to finish college and focus on a career path. Her 2 jobs were not enough to pay her regular bills, let alone her student loans. Brea wanted to make her parents proud and not waste their hard work on putting her through a good high school. They offered to pay for college, but Brea refused. Her parents needed a break, and she did not want them to have to keep paying her way. The values instilled in her were strong, and she wanted to work hard for what she wanted. Brea was never able to finish college. Instead, her life was thrown into chaos. 3 years ago, her mother and father were killed in an accident. She did not know exactly how they were killed, only that the Rosses, the very people her family worked for, were responsible. Wyatt Rosses, the father of the family, threatened Brea. If she did not take a pay off and move out of the country, he would make sure she joined her family in death. Having no one else to help her with the massive legal issues it would take, not to mention the amount of debt Brea was in already, she left. Brea took the money and did what Wyatt told her to do. Brea was young and afraid of the family. They were billionaires. They had dozens of layers and owned the law. If they wanted to, Brea knew they could have killed her just as Wyatt threatened. The fearful woman packed her things and moved to Mexico. Wyatt promised to pay off her debts and give her a monthly allowance if she did as he asked. She was to live there and to never speak of what happened. Nor was Brea ever able to say who gave her the money. She was to tell anyone who asked that it was the insurance payout for the death of her family in an accident. Brea was also forbidden to come back to America. Brea hated herself for taking the coward's way and taking the money, but she had no other choice. The first year of living in Mexico, Brea was afraid and barely ventured out of her home. She did not know the language nor the culture. She did make the best of her situation by trying to stay positive, but her optimist side was almost drained. She was alone in a strange place, and she was deeply saddened about her family and the wrong did to her. Brea turned it inward and did her best to press forward. Her break finally came on that day in the restaurant. Meeting Christina was the best thing to happen to her. Not only did the woman help Brea with the language and culture, but she also provided a great friendship and almost family atmosphere. Christina's family loved Brea equally and had Brea over often. Eventually Brea was hired on at the family-owned store. Brea loaded up the cart full of plants and made her way back out towards the garden section. Brea bent down and began to take off the various plants from the cart and place them on the shelves. The woman paused when she noticed a shadow scurry out the corner of her eyes. Brea removed her headphones and stood up straight. The only thing that she could hear was the chirp of the crickets and passing cars in the distance. Her hazel eyes glanced around the floor and various plants for whatever ran by. She then crossed her arms and called out playfully, "Okay, you come out now." Brea kept a warm smile on her face as the plants on the ground moved. Slowly a green face popped out. A tiny creature around 7 inches tall poked its head out. Its big black eyes looked her over as its tiny mouth smiled. "You know I don't like it when you sneak around like that." Brea spoke as the creature covered its mouth to laugh. It was tiny and frail-looking. Its skin and long pointy ears matched the foliage it was hiding. Inches tones of green and brown splotched over its body. It wore a small t-shirt that read "Mama's Boy" in Spanish. The tie-dye shirt used to belong to the older woman's chihuahua. It fit the creature like an oversized nightgown. Brea did not know what exactly the creature was, only that one day last year she ran into it stuck in the fence line. It had got tangled up in the back fence of the building and was afraid. She untangled the poor creature. Over the next few months, she left food out. Between the food and her pleasant singing voice, the tiny thing warmed up to Brea. Every day it would come out to see her. It was not dangerous at all. It helped Brea with the plants and kept the rats out of the building. Brea wanted to name it, but she did not know if it was a girl or a boy, so she just called it Fern. It fit. It loved plants and was almost the same color, plus her favorite cartoon growing up was Fern Gully. Brea had asked the old woman and she called them Eldund. They were like elves or gnomes. The old woman said they could be good or evil. Lucky this one was nice. Brea dug in her blue apron and pulled out a pack of crackers. The creature looked around before quickly running to grab the pack and run back. "Don't eat them all, you will spoil your supper." Every night before Brea left, she would leave the creature supper. Brea noticed it ate bugs, rodents, and anything human food she gave it. Eventually the thing made a nest in the back of the store behind the shelves of storage. Brea helped with that as well by giving the thing tiny pillows and building material. She also gave Fern tiny doll clothes, but it preferred the tie-dye shirt for some reason. It lived happy, safe, and undisturbed in the store. Brea wished it could speak. She wanted to know more about it. Brea wished she could ask it where it was from, if it had friends or family. She wanted to know how it ended up in this store, and many other questions that she would never know the answer to. "Well, I need to finish putting the plants out and water them so I can leave." Brea turned to go back to the plants on the cart. The creature popped a cracker in its mouth and looked around. It made sure no one was around and walked closer to watch Brea. It only showed itself to her, so when the older woman came back out, it darted into the foliage. "I am leaving, Brea. Can you please lock up the store when you are done?" the old woman asked as she walked to the back door. "Yes, ma'am. Good night." Brea waved and watched her walk out. Brea then turned her attention to the plants beside her. "She is gone now." Fern poked its head out again. This time it had a large cricket in its mouth. Brea made a disguised face. The creature quickly swallowed the cricket and helped Brea with the tiny plants. Brea began to sing as she continued her job now with the help from Fern. After Brea finished picking up the plants and watering them all, she left out food for the tiny creature. She placed her apron in the back and clocked out. She then grabbed her purse and dug out her phone. Brea was going to meet her friend at the local cantina. It was something they did every Friday, but this Friday would be different. The cantina allowed Brea to sing tonight if she wanted. The local band was sick, and it was a chance to show her talent. Brea was super nervous and excited at the same time. Luckily, the crowd that hung there were mixed between Spanish and American tourists. They spoke a mixture of Spanish and English, so she could sing in English. Brea was just getting a hold of speaking a conversation Spanish. She doubted she could sing in it. As the young woman locked the fence and door behind her, she dialed Christina's phone. She let her know she was locking up the store and would go home to freshen up. Brea needed to take a quick shower and change into a nice cocktail dress if she were to sing tonight. Normally she just wore simple jeans and a comfy t-shirt, but tonight was special. She needed to dress to impress if she were to get good reviews. Brea knew her voice was great, but oftentimes people judged on the outward appearance as well as her voice. If the night went well, her hopes were to make it a regular to sing. "Hey Christina." Her friend finally picked up. "I am just locking up." She spoke in Spanish to her friend. Fern peeked its head out the fence, and Brea petted it. "My Uber is here, so let me let you go." She hung up the phone and pointed at Fern. "Be a good little buddy." Fern made a cooing sound and ran back to the plants chasing a roach. Chapter 5. Dallas, Texas. Diana sat at her father's desk listening to the arrogant man in front of her. To the side of her was William, her head of security and boyfriend. Diana could tell he was getting as annoyed as herself. The man was clearly talking out of his backside. Diana needed to stop the rambling and put the man in his place. "Look, you came to me to sell your broken down rigs. You know I am well and capable of flipping them and turning them for profit and drilling. I am not an idiot. I was raised in this business. So please do not come in here and think you can get one over me, use me, or try and run things. Our family owns the largest oil company in Texas and soon the southern states. You want to be a part of that and do business, fine. But do not think you know everything, because clearly you do not. You wouldn't be begging at my door for help if you did." She stood up and walked in front of the desk. She leaned on it and glared down at the man. "Now do you want to talk about real business or continue to ramble and run your mouth?" she asked. The man was quiet for a moment and then apologized. "Ms. Ross's, I would like to have a contract with your family business." The man straightened up his attitude and Diana's hard face lifted. A small smile curved on her pink lips as she extended her hand. "I'll have my men come by and take a look at everything." The man stood up and shook her hand. He then left quickly. When the door was closed, she turned and faced William with a crossed face. "Goodness." She sighed deeply. William's hard and stern face also lightened up with a smirk. He walked around the desk and stood in front of her. "I thought I might have to shoot him." Diana let out a small chuckle as her hand tugged on his tie. Now, killer, I have it under control. Believe me, my brothers are 10 times worse than that to deal with. William's hand rested on her hip. He knew how crazy her family was, but he loved her anyway. William was silent most of the time and very loyal to her and her family. You think you can trust him? He ran his company into the ground. He spoke softly as he looked down at her. Will was no expert, but he did pick up a few things in business as he served. Heck, his boss before the Rosses was Meth, the king of business. Well, I won't be his company anymore. Only in name. It will be mine and my family's. So she lifted up and gave him a peck on the lips. Crafty. He let out a small laugh. I am my father's daughter. She shrugged. Yes, you are, but I think you are a little bit better than he ever was. William kept a warm smile. I just wish Conway saw it that way. I am glad, however, that Mammon is making me head in the business name of the company. She smiled up at him. I knew that would happen. Conway only cares about his politics. Will added, I know, I am just a little surprised is all. I mean, he is still head of the family, but I get to run the business. The same business I was shunned from and shipped off to handle the bad debit of. I bet Dad is rolling in his grave. Diana chuckled. Did Jackie ever come in from Galveston yet? Diana asked as she walked back behind the desk to gather her things. No, but she is on her way. One of my guys called me earlier. They were just leaving the manor down there. Diana and her adoptive daughter Jackie lived in Galveston and had no reason to move back to Dallas, but with Diana becoming the head CEO, they might have no choice. I hate to admit it, but I might have to make a permanent move. Diana frowns. Our main office is only 30 minutes away from the manor here, and I have to stay close for the company. I just hate to leave. So many good memories were made in Galveston. Diana picked up her purse and walked towards the door. I know, but we can make new memories. I can take you dancing anytime you want. Remember our first dance? Will asked as he walked with her out the office. Diana's mind went back to the night she first met William. He was tall, silent, stern and a bit awkward around her and Jackie. Much has changed since then, but Diana will always remember the first time William held her and looked at her in a loving manner. She remembers it much due to it being the first time a man had ever looked at her like that. A man who actually cared for her and not her money or what she could do for them. Flashback. 4 years earlier, Diana and Jackie waited in the back of the limo for Mike, the head of security and a family friend. He was to drive the two to Jackie's prom, while Diana helped supervise and accepted an award for contributions to the school. Jackie was not blood-born of Diana, since she was barren, but Diana adopted her. The 17-year-old sat nervously beside her mom as she waited. She never had a family or was never shown love like this. Diana pushed for Jackie to go back to school and get into college, so she could take up Diana's businesses one day. Sorry, Ms. Rosses, but Mike is very ill. Mr. Me will escort you two to the dance. One of the security guards informed Diana. Diana nodded and rolled up the window as her guard walked away. She felt the car shake as this Me got in on the driver's side. He glanced up in the rearview mirror at Diana and Jackie. Ma'am. Me then started the car and drove towards the school. It was eerily silent for most of the drive. Diana was used to Big Mike and Jackie teasing each other playfully, but this new man was taking his job very seriously. A good thing, she supposed. I feel bad you don't have a date, Mom. Jackie broke the silence as she put her phone away. Jackie then took out her mirror and polished up her dark skin with foundation. It is fine. I can make do. I have for 5 years since Gil. Gil was Diana's deceased husband. Wyatt wanted her to remarry for the family deal, and she refused. That refusal made Wyatt shun her and ship her to Galveston, but Diana did not mind. She enjoyed the view of the beach and a place to make her own mark from under her father's shadow. What about the new guy? Jackie chuckled and pointed to the driver. Diana blushed and looked towards the driver. Me kept his eyes straight on the road and his mouth shut. Oh heavens no. I am way too old and poor Mr. Me probably just wants to do his job and go home. Jackie. Diana chuckles. Me parked the car and walked to the door. The two ladies exited the car and walked towards the entrance. Mom, you are beautiful and not old. Just ask him. I am sure he would not mind escorting you around for the dance. I don't want you to be alone. Hush, I will be fine. Go have fun. She swatted her daughter's shoulder playful. Jackie and her date take off inside as Me exits from beside the car. You are not old, were the first 4 words he spoke all night besides ma'am. It almost startled Diana as she turned around to see him standing behind her. I would be delighted to escort you, miss. He held out an elbow for her. Diana wrapped her arm around it slowly as the two made their way inside. The high school gym was decorated in a tropical theme with fish and other sea creatures hanging from the ceiling. Teenagers littered the gym, some dancing and others sitting along the gym walls. Diana stood towards the back beside the end of the bleachers watching them. She smiled when she noticed Jackie laughing and having fun. The lights lowered and the music slowed down. The couples made their way to the middle as they began to sing. Jackie and her boyfriend swayed to the music, holding each other while Diana looked on. You know, if my parents would have come to my prom, I would have been embarrassed. William spoke as he stood next to Diana. She could not tell if he was serious or joking. He was so serious, looking like his eyes were focused on the dancing teens. Diana glanced at him, then back to Jackie. Well, prom was held at my house when I was in high school. Diana rose a brow. When she was growing up, parties were always going on in her mansion home, and her mother wanted prom there to not only show off her wealth, but get the other kids' parents to invest. I'm sorry. William looked over at her. Diana could not help but laugh. This caused William to finally smile. It was all right. I was half drunk to care. I was a bit of a rebel and a diva growing up. She shrugged. I was the class clown. William shrugged. Who would have thought? What changed? The military? She asked. William kept quiet and thought she overstepped herself. William finally broke the silence. Care to dance? He held out his pale hand. At first Diana thought maybe he was joking, and there was some truth to the class clown, but he kept his hand out and gave her a warm smile. She placed her honey-colored hand into his. William held her hand and led her to the dance floor. He placed his hands on her waist as she placed hers on his shoulders. It was a bit awkward at first, being she just met this man, but Diana felt at ease when she finally looked up into his eyes. For a moment Diana could have sworn his eyes changed from a dark brown to an ice blue. She was not unfamiliar with the supernatural. Mammon ran their family and she witnessed a few of the ceremonies. Also, her father had a few creatures on his payroll, so unlike others, it was common. A passing couple bumped Diana and made her lose her gaze. She fell into his chest as she tried to catch herself. You all right? He whispered. Diana smiled and stood up straight. Of course. She batted her eyelashes up towards him and wrapped her arms around his neck. Present. Diana and William made their way towards the basement of the mansion. Conway was already down there discussing things about the business with Mammon. The basement was low lit with torches as a large pentagram was drawn in the center. The stone altar had a red velvet cloth over it where a large cup sat. "Good, Diana, I am glad you have made it here. As well as William. Will you three please step into the circle?" Mammon smiled as he walked to the altar. Diana, William and Conway all walked and stood in the center of the draw circle. "You are all here of your free will, correct?" Mammon asked. All three nodded and Mammon stepped into the circle. His human form shifted to his true form. The fallen angel was over 7 feet tall. His thick leather brown skin bloated as a golden crown sat on his bald head. His robes were gold thread, and he wore many rings and necklaces. Ram's horns curled from his head as his huge feet and gold sandals patted on the concrete floor. He held the cup up by his waist as he walked around them. "Do you pledge yourself to me as your forefathers did?" All three spoke out loud saying yes. Mammon stopped in front of Conway. "You are to be the head of the family now. Are you willing to take on the responsibilities? To serve me? In return I will give you your heart's desire. Ask what you want." Mammon grew silent. "I want to be a congressman. I want wealth and power." Mammon nodded and gave him the cup to drink from. Conway drank the blood inside and handed the cup back. Mammon then turned to Diana. "I want to own my family's business. To be CEO of life and to have wealth for me and my daughter. I would also like to be able to have other children." She glanced at William and then to Mammon. Mammon nodded. He handed her the cup, and she drank. Mammon took the cup from her and glanced at William. "I want to have a long life. Also, for my family to have wealth and safety from the judges and hunters. For my children and 4 generations to have wealth." William took the cup and pledged himself to Mammon like he did to Meph when he was alive. "I would have you tell me everything you know of Meph and his business, so I may take them over," he told William. The ice fiend nodded and handed him the cup back. "You have drunk my blood and now will seal the deal with your blood signature. Your requests will be fulfilled as long as you keep your oath to serve me." Mammon walked out the circle, turning back human, and placed the cup back on the altar. A blonde woman came from the shadows. Her slime and pale figure almost glowed as she stood beside Mammon. "Merlot will take your blood signatures." Mammon picked up a paper parchment from the altar and handed it to her. The beautiful blonde walked to Conway first. She was so captivating Conway could barely keep his eyes off her. He signed his name and Merlot winked. She then walked to Diana and then William. The deal was done. Merlot walked back to her master and handed him the paper parchment. Mammon tucked it into his breast coat pocket and wrapped his hand around Merlot's tiny corseted waist. Her green eyes shimmered as she glanced at the 3 before her. The siren remained quiet as her master continued. "You are free to go. I will however need you all to sign the human legal stuff tomorrow after the funeral. This is to please the lawyers and such." Mammon chuckled. The 3 nodded and silently exited the basement. Chapter 6. Mexico. Brea stood on the stage holding a microphone in her hands. The lights shone so bright she could not make out the crowd that was in front of her. Her stomach was in knots as the beat started and fell waiting for her to start to sing. She slowly opened her mouth and let out a strong note. The crowd went silent in anticipation. She continued to sing. Her strong voice had all eyes on her. Christina sat at the bar and cheered her friend on as she sang. Brea chose the song by Carrie Underwood. It was a toss-up between her and Kelly Clarkson. Brea's vocals matched the 2 ladies, so to match the tone of the song would be easy. The light finally lowered, and Brea was able to scan the crowd. Everyone smiled and were enchanted by her voice. Brea paused for the guitar solo as her eyes fell on a Hispanic male towards the back of the bar. He sat in the shadows as he watched her. Everyone else in the room had a happy aura about them, but this guy seemed off. He looked as if he had been out in the desert like an outlaw. He had long stubble on his face and a few cuts on his face and hands from what she could see. He wore all black and seemed to blend in with the shadows of the darkness. Brea had an unsettling feeling about him. Christina had told her about the narcos and sicarios. She was warned to stay away from them. The man seems to fit the persona of them, and it gave Brea an unsettling feeling. She pushed it out of her mind and continued to sing. Brea stayed to herself and did not hang out with the wrong crowd. The young woman did not need any more trouble than she already had. The only people she talked to was Christina and her family. This was Brea's first public performance in 3 years. Blue lights on the horizon, dust clouds filling the sky. If they get the cuffs on us, it is 25 to life. Run, run, your own direction, and I'll lead 'em down a different road. Take the gun, hide the car and the money. I'll meet you in Mexico. Brea finished her song, and the crowd erupted in applause. She bowed and handed the microphone over to the host. The young woman then exited the stage and walked to Christina. You did so great. Beautiful voice as always. Christina hugged her friend and handed her a drink. Brea kept a warm smile on her face as she took the drink. Thank you. I was a little nervous. She paused to glance at the male in the corner. He was still watching her. Brea just shrugged the feeling off as she turned and sat beside her friend. Wish Mama would have come, but you know her, and Papa don't like these places. Christina chuckled as she sipped her drink. The pair of ladies wore matching dresses. The only difference was the color. Brea wore a soft pink sparkly cocktail dress, while Christina's dress was orange. A few guys came up to the bar to offer to buy them drinks, but they turned them down. How are our classes going? Brea asked. I am going okay. I will just be so grateful when it is all over with. Christina placed an order of nachos for the two. The women turned in their seats to glance at the crowd as they sipped on their drinks. It was a good turnout tonight. And you did so well. I am sure they will ask you to sing again for sure. I hope so. I have not sung publicly like this in a long time. Brea sighed a bit. Christina knew about Brea's past and what happened to her. Everything except the whole Ross's payoff. Brea just told her friend she came to Mexico to start anew. Miss Optimistic, of course they will ask you back. Are you okay? You seem a bit off tonight. Christina asked her friend. Brea was normally upbeat and happy. For some reason Brea was acting a bit strange. Her eyes were still darting to the corner of the room where the strange male sat. The whole time he was for sure watching her, but she did not want to alarm her friend. Oh, I am fine. I was just nervous and hungry. She forced a giggle as to not alarm her friend. I can understand that. I am always hungry. So, how has the store been holding up? Christian inquired. It has been slow lately. I guess the spring fever is over. Oh, believe me, it will pick up. Summer is just as busy as the spring. Everyone is out and about in the yards. Christina informed Brea. Brea watched her way to walk to the stranger in the back, obstructing her view. Brea turned to face her friend, trying to forget about him. We are starting to get a few more shipments in. You should come by and help sometime. Brea teased. The two laughed and turned back to the bar when the food was placed in front of them. The waiter brought the stranger a new refill of beer. He sat the glass down and smiled down at the man. The man broke his gaze on Brea and glanced up at the waiter. Alejandro, haven't seen you here in a while. Business or pleasure? The waiter leaned on the table waiting on a response. Alejandro smiled up at the male and slid his beer towards him. It is always business, amigo. Alejandro brought his drink to his lips and sipped. They must be pretty important if they sent you to find whoever or whatever you are looking for. The waiter watched him a bit longer. My employer knows I am the best at what I do, so of course they are. Just don't do anything in the bar, okay? Last time when you took out that witch doctor in the bathroom, you left a mess. I covered for you, but, man, I can't do that anymore. Alejandro slipped the man a 20 and grins. The hitman sipped his beer and remained quiet as he glanced around the room. Don't worry. Nothing will go down in the bar tonight. He reassures the waiter. The male nodded and walked back toward the bar. Alejandro scanned the room before going back to keep an eye on Brea. It took him a few days to track the woman down, but he finally found her. The posters on the outside of the bar gave her away. Now he only needs to follow her home and finish her off. Quick, clean, and without suspicion. The money would be tripled if he could get it done within the week. The money was too good to not pass up. He normally did not go after human women. The employer was willing to pay, and everyone has their price. Alejandro normally was hired to take out powerful supernatural humans like witches or vampires and other creatures, due to his skill set. Every now and then he had to take out humans, but it was rare. He did not ask why she needed to be taken out. The less he knew, the easier it would be for him. From the age of 18, Alejandro hunted and slayed the monsters of the darkness. Now it does not matter if they were innocent or evil, if the money were right, he would pull the trigger. He downed half the beer and sat the glass down on the table. He took out his cell phone and texted his employer. He would do the job tonight. Brea and Christina finished their food and made their way to the dance floor. The young woman danced around happily, swaying to the music. Laughter escaped their lips as Brea spun her friend around. Brea needed this escape. It was coming up on the anniversary of the death of her parents. It had been 3 years, but the pain of that loss still stuck with her. Along with the guilt of running away, Brea's heart would become heavy. She did her best to cover it up with her warm personality, but the sadness bleed through at times. As Brea turned to dance with a guy besides her, she noticed the man in the corner still watching her. Her eyes darted away quickly after making eye contact. Brea's smile dropped along with her gaze to the floor. For sure the guy knew that she knew he was watching her. Who was he? What did he want? He looked too tough to be a businessman or talent agent. What if he was some crazy stalker? Thoughts flooded her mind as she continued to dance. Brea could not take it any longer. She turned to her friend. Hey Christina, I think I need to go home. Christina's mood dropped slightly to concern for her friend. Are you okay? She spoke loud over the music. Kinder. I think it is just something I ate or drank. Can we go? Brea asked. Sure. Christina led her friend from the dance floor and towards the bar. They grabbed their purses and paid their tab. I will call a taxi. Christina pulled out her phone and dialed. Brea followed her friend out of the bar. She did not even look to see if the guy was watching. She was paranoid as it was. Brea just wanted to get out of there and back home quickly. The women stood outside the bar and waited for their ride. Brea wrapped her arms around herself as she leaned against the brick wall. Christina texted her boyfriend as she waited with her friend for the taxi. Do you need any medicine or something? Christina asked Brea, still concerned. No, I will be okay. I just need to go lay down is all. Crazy night. Brea gave her a reassuring smile. Okay. Just making sure. Christina put her phone away and leaned against the wall with her. "It just sucks, your big night, and you feel bad," she added. "I know, but I will be fine." Brea laid her head on Christina's shoulder. Alejandro tossed a $10 bill on the table and stood up. He slowly made his way through the crowd and towards the exit. He walked out and glanced around for the woman, his target. He noticed she was with her friend. The hitman took out his cigarettes and quickly turned to walk to his car. He would follow them but keep his distance. The woman seemed to notice him watching her, and she could call the authorities if he was spotted following. Alejandro walked to his car and slid into the driver's seat. It was a few car lengths away from the women, but not too far where he could not have a clear view. He lit up a cigarette and puffed it slowly as he kept his eyes fixed on Brea. The taxi arrived and the woman slowly entered the cab. The taxi pulled away, and Alejandro waited a minute before following it. Alejandro parked a few driveways down and waited. Alejandro killed the car and flicked the ashes into the night air. He watched Brea exit the taxi and walk towards her small home. She dug in her purse and retrieved her keys. The woman unlocked her front door and quickly entered. The taxi finally pulled away when Brea closed her front door. Alejandro reached into his glove compartment and pulled out a handgun. He made sure it was loaded before placing it in his belt and pocket. He did not need any special weapons due to the fact that she was a normal human. Anything would work, but a gun would be quick and painless. He did not want her to suffer. He was a hitman, but he was not a monster. Brea quickly undressed and washed the night away in the shower. She did her best to forget about the man who kept watching her, but it was in the back of her mind. He was an attractive man in a dangerous way, but that did not give him the right to creep around watching her like that. "Oh, Brea, forget about it." She sighed as she wrapped her robe around her body. She slowly walked to her vanity and took a seat as she began wrapping her hair in a hair wrap. Brea then picked up the makeup remover wipes. As she began to wipe the mascara from her lashes, Brea hummed to herself. She was almost finished wiping her face when the sound of a click from her front door made her jump a bit. She turned to glance around to see if she could see anyone. At first, she thought maybe it was her friend coming back to check on her. "Christina?" she called out, but no reply. Brea slowly stood up from her vanity and walked to her side of the bed. She grabbed a bat she had sitting there. She gripped the wood tight, but with shaking hands. Fear gripped her as she slowly walked out of the bedroom. Brea could hear her heart pounding in her chest as she made her way from the bedroom and towards the living room. As Brea made her way to the end of the small hall that led into the living room, she caught a glimpse of someone standing on the other side of the wall. Their reflection showed in the sliding doors of the living room. It was the same man at the bar. He was in her house and was holding on to a gun. So, he was a Sicario. Brea had two options. Either she could run or fight. The guy would most likely catch her if she tried to run, so her only option was to fight. She was not too skilled. Brea only took a few karate classes in high school, but she had no other option. She had to deal with this guy now and hopefully find out why he was after her. Brea took a deep breath and lunged out with the bat. She swung wildly and hit the guy straight in the arm. Alejandro was not expecting it. It caught him off guard as the bat hit his arm. He let out a scream, but quickly moved before she could hit him in the face. The bat came down and hit a side table next to her couch. Alejandro did not want to shoot up the place and wake up the whole neighborhood. Brea swung the bat again but missed again. Alejandro rolled over the couch to avoid her wild swings. Brea let out an angry but scared scream as she continued to swing. She hit the ground hard, but the man rolled out the way. Alejandro finally got his bearings and was able to get off the floor, but he was still on one knee. Brea came down with the bat, but he caught in his hand. He gripped it and raised his gun. The gun was pointed straight at Brea. She watched the barrel slowly rise to her face as the man stood up. Brea let go of the bat and flung her arms around. "Just do it already," she yelled as tears began to form. This caught Alejandro off guard, and he raised a brow. "I am tired. I am so tired of this guilt. Living off the money of the very people who killed my parents and now want me dead. I cannot take this anymore. I will not accept the blood money anymore. I deserve this for being a coward and not standing up for my family," she sobbed. Alejandro just blinked a couple times trying to make sense of everything. Brea grabbed the end of the gun and placed it on her chest to where her heart was. He dropped the bat and held on to the gun with 2 hands now. "Pull the trigger," she sobbed in anger. "Those rich bastards will never have to face punishment or justice, and I can't live with that anymore. I can't hide in lies anymore." Brea's eyes locked with Alejandro's eyes for a moment. Alejandro took a few deep breaths to calm himself, but for some reason he could not pull the trigger. A part of him screamed for him to just do it, while a soft voice told him no. Brea closed her eyes and accepted her fate. A few more moments passed. Those few seconds felt like eternity as Brea waited to be killed. A few happy memories flashed in her thoughts as she cried silently. Alejandro let his gun drop to his side as he began to curse in Spanish. Brea knew most of the words he was spewing, and she opened her eyes to watch him pace in her living room. Alejandro could not kill her. The words she spoke and her brave demeanor in the face of death reminded him of his youngest sister Angela. Memories of his sister played over in his mind. Her brave face right before her death. Alejandro put his gun away and placed one hand on his hip. His other hand wiped over his mouth, then face, and then through his dark hair. Brea watched him, wondering what he was doing. Alejandro was trying to calm down. His adrenaline was pumping, and he was supposed to kill this woman. If he did not, then others no doubt would come after her. He let out another curse word and placed his hands on his knees as he looked over at her. The way she was looking at him, he could have sworn it was Angela calling out for help. "So?" Brea broke the awkward silence. "You are not going to kill me?" she asked. Alejandro shook his head no. "The Rosses sent you, huh?" she asked as she reached up to clasp her robe closed and sat on the couch. "Yes. And they will send others." Alejandro stood up straight and watched her. "So why not just kill me?" she asked, not understanding. Alejandro took in a deep breath and took a seat in the chair beside the couch. "What you said about justice and punishment." Alejandro turned his head to face her. "What of it?" she spoke softly. "I was not always a sicario. I once was a judge," he confessed. "A judge? Like in a courtroom?" She twisted her face a bit. He looked too young to be a judge, and his mannerisms were off. "No, not that kind of judge." "What do you know about the supernatural?" Alejandro asked. "Well, at my job there is an elf that lives in the back storage room, but other than that, nothing," she disclosed. "Judges are humans blessed with supernatural abilities to defend God's people and others from darkness. Supernatural and or evil humans set to cause harm. Me and my younger sister Angela were trained in the ways of a judge. After she died, I left the crowd, or the judges. I used my abilities to gain cash." He paused and glanced to see if she was paying attention. Brea hung on to every word. It was crazy, yet she believed him. Brea also felt bad for him. She knew what it was like to lose family. "Why did they send you? I am not a supernatural creature. I did nothing to them. They are the ones who took everything from me. Wyatt is dead." Conway wanted to clear up any loose ends before his election campaign. Alejandro explained. Brea scoffed. "That family is a virus. The judges should go after them." She wiped another tear away from her face. "What if they could? I am technically a judge." "Well, ex-judge," he chuckled to himself. "I want to know why that family wants me dead, and who and why they killed my family. I want them to be punished." Her words were sharp and harsh. He nodded and extended his hand to her. "Alejandro Hernandez, Brea Cooper." She shook his hand. Chapter 7. Texas. Conway was relaxing by the poolside of his new home outside of Fredericksburg. Elections were coming up and being on the campaign trail would give Conway no time for rest. Along with his drink, Conway likes to often smoke weed. Since he moved from Dallas, Conway needed to get a brand new weed dealer. As Conway stood on the steps inside his pool bare-chested and in swimming trunks, he was in excellent shape, being a military man. A few battle scars were littered on his side and back, but nothing too noticeable. Conway watched as a spiky, dirty blonde-hair man walked through the back door. He was tall and skinny with intense eyes. The man wears a sly smile and a wide muscle shirt under an open button-down shirt. The way he strutted in, it was as if he owned the place. He was arrogant and had that salesman demeanor about him. Conway kept his stone face as the man approached him. "Mr. Ross's. Glad to meet your acquaintance. Trevor Hoffman. Denny up in Dallas sent me." Trevor walked to the pool's edge and smiled at the congressman. "Then he let you know that discretion is a must." Conway took a sip of his whiskey as he watched the man that stood beside him. "Yes, sir. Confidentiality is my specialty, besides my weed, of course." Trevor chuckled as his own joke. He noticed Conway not smiling. Trevor cleared his throat and glanced around the pool area. It was just like the other rich clients' homes. Large and glamorous. Trevor was the dealer to most of the high-class clients in the area. He graduated from the streets to special clients only. However, sometimes he would visit the clubs to gain more customers. "Would you like to select from the case, or would you like me to put together a welcome package for you?" Trevor kept his sly smile on as he watched Conway. Conway stepped out of the pool and towards Trevor. He sized up the dealer before speaking. "Leave the case and give the guard your bill. If it is any good, and I can trust you, I will be in contact for more." Trevor nodded and held out his hand. Conway took it and shook it firmly. "Will do, boss." Trevor smiled and turned to walk out. His phone rang and the dealer picked it up. He began screaming at the person on the other end, almost running into the redhead that walked past him. Trevor paused for a moment to check her out. He noticed her short skirt and sucked his teeth for a moment. The man on the other end of the phone drew his attention away again. Trevor continued to fuss as he walked into the house to finish his business. Natalia thumbed through her book as she walked past the screaming drug dealer. She did not even look at him as she walked towards Conway. "I have read over your contracts and the papers the lawyers brought. They are good to sign," she explained. Conway finished his drink as he looked down at Nat. "I have to leave. I have to stay close to campus until the weekends now," she explained. "Do what you need to." He spoke coldly and as if he did not care. He walked past her and inside. Conway went to his room to change out of his swimming trunks into casual attire. He threw on some khakis and a polo shirt. As he walked down the staircase, the congressman noticed Mammon walking below. Conway sighed deeply to himself. He did not want to deal with the fallen one today. It was his only day to relax. He was tired of dealing with business and needed a break. "Can I help you?" Conway asked. "We have a problem." Mammon glanced around and then back to Conway. The fallen angel was on edge, and Conway could sense it. Conway led his master into the office and closed the door. Mammon took out a fancy cigarette and lit it as he spoke. "The girl you wanted dead is still alive, but that, however, is not the worst of our problems." Mammon growled. "The girl, she is not who you think she is. Also, that hitman you acquired, he is a judge. Well, and ex-judge, but still the blood of a judge runs in him. The blood of Gideon. My most hated enemy." Mammon hissed as he paced. "Sit, my boy." "Why?" Conway asked. "You will want to when I tell you the truth of the matter." Mammon puffed on his smoke. Conway sat with an attitude and waited for Mammon. Brea Cooper was adopted by Wilfred and Nicole Cooper. "Yes, the couple you killed. Wilfred was head chef at the Ross's household, as you know, and Nicole worked as a personal trainer to Mrs. Faye Ross's and Tina Ross's, your mother. When Tina died, Nicole worked solely for Faye Ross's, Wyatt's sister and your aunt. The two became close, and Faye almost considered Nicole as a friend, and not just the hired help. Faye and Darren Richard had an affair, and Faye became pregnant. Being that Darren was of darker skin color, you know, African American, she would come out like your sister Diana. Wyatt and Beth, Darren's sister ironically. Anyways, of course you know she is your sister. The fact that Faye's affair could not be played off as Faye's husband's baby since he was white, Faye had to do something about the baby. She did not want to abort. Instead, she would hide it and give the baby away. If anyone found out about her affairs, it could have ruined the business deals the Rosses had with Faye's husband and his family. Everyone slept with everyone, but no one got caught or said anything about it. The key was to keep your flings secret. The Filipino couple, the Coopers, were childless, so Faye helped them to adopt Brea. The moment Nicole laid eyes on the beautiful tawny or light brownish orange-colored girl, she fell in love. The couple raised Brea in a loving and strict home. They instilled values into the young girl as she grew. As a child, she did play with you until the couple was told not to bring her around anymore. The pain of seeing her daughter raised by another was too much for Faye. Eventually Nicole was let go, but her husband continued to cook for the family. And you knew the rest of the story. Mammon finished his story and his cigarette. He was right, Conway needed to sit to take all that in. This girl, Brea, he had a hit on was his cousin. No wonder why Wyatt did not just kill her. Wyatt had a strict rule about not killing family. Conway, however, did not. He was head of the household now. The hit would stand. And that hitman? Alejandro? Conway asked. Personal. But he needs to be killed. Especially now that he is helping your cousin. Conway rose a brow. Helping her? He asked. Yes. For some reason he did not kill her. He was spotted driving over the border this morning with her in the car. Mammon explained. Conway stood up and pulled out his phone. Let them come. She can join the family or die. Plus, we are already ahead of them knowing they are on the way here. It would be easier to trap them and dispose of them that way. Conway explained. Mammon grins and pats his shoulder roughly and squeezes it with a toothy smile. That is why you are the head of this family. Don't disappoint me. Mammon shimmered out of the room, leaving Conway. Conway instantly sends an email out to double the guards around the home, around Diana and around Natalia. He then makes his way out of his office. One of the guards holds the case of weed for him. Conway opens the case and selects a few items before walking to his room. Do not let anyone else into this house. I do not care who they are. I am going to relax while I can. Conway barked orders at the men as if he was still in the military. He only hired guards that served in the military. The soldier bond they shared gave Conway reassurance that they would do everything in their power to protect and even lay down their lives for him and his family. Plus, they did as they were ordered. No questions asked. As Conway rolled a blunt in his room, he contacted his sister Diana. He told her everything Mammon revealed to him. I can't believe they hide that. Diana spoke on the other side of the phone. Wyatt really took secrets to the grave. Conway replied. He never called him father or dad. Not since he was a child. He had lost all respect for his father, and even in death he could care less about him. Have you heard from Harry? He never showed for the funeral, but neither did you. Diana spoke in a scolding tone. I could have cared less. Conway spoke as he sat on the edge of his bed. Yeah, well, this afternoon you need to show up for the will reading and signing of the documents. Diana reminded her brother. Yes, I am well aware. Conway was a bit annoyed. He did not like it when Diana tried to act like a mother and order him around. Harry is the luckiest one out of all of us. He ran off and lived his life away from this bloodthirst family. Well, last time I looked, Conway, you enjoyed blood. You were the soldier boy, remember? You tried to run away but came right back. Last time I remember Wyatt treated you the worst, and yet you show up at his funeral. Did you cry? Conway asked. I put on a nice show for the investors. It is all about showmanship, dear brother. Diana chuckled. Conway could not help but crack a rare smile. His voice lightened up and Diana could tell. You should receive an Oscar along with the business. Oh, is that a joke? Diana asked. You didn't know I was a comedian. Conway replied. If you are a comedian, then I'm the Queen of England. Look, I have to go put on a show again for the others. Make sure you are here, Conway. Remember, you are the head of the house now. Your election can be put on hold for a moment for this. Conway laid back on the bed and blew out smoke towards the ceiling. Yeah, was all he said before he hung up. He tossed the phone and kept his gaze on the haze that floated in the air. Denny was right. Trevor knew what he was doing. Now the only thing Conway needs to know is that he could keep his mouth shut. This vice was not one he wanted his voters to know about. Since Natalia was out of the city, Conway thought about Calliope. The Bianchini girl was a ballerina that recently caught the eye of the congressman at his last campaign dinner. He knew the Russians would not like it one bit due to the fact Callie was the daughter of the Italians mobsters in New York. They probably would like the fact he was not faithful to Nat, but Conway did not care. He did not love her. She was just a pretty face that was part of a deal. He got tired of her real quick. Conway's thought then went to the siren that showed up during the ceremony. Her beautiful green eyes were often in his thoughts. However, she belonged to Mammon. The risk would be too great if he tried anything with her. He did not know this fallen angel, but he knew he could not cross him. A creature of that kind of power, Conway was no match for. Plus, he did give him and his family their every desires. Like a good soldier, he would take his oath to hear and serve the devil. Conway also needs to apply to the supernatural races. The current growth of the different species in the country offered Conway a way to a stronger pull. If he called for more relaxed rules and regulation on the supernatural class, it could mean more allies and investors. The laws were still being formed on the human side of the law, and if he had a say in them, he could control the class. Conway did not recognize the judges. They were not all American citizens and took orders from men in another country. They were a group of not widely recognized, even if they were helping some FBI agencies. No doubt the hidden government already had supernatural employment, and, in the military, now, the congressman would play on that. Conway wanted his hand in enough cookie jars to make sure he would stay fed if one of those jars would run out. Chapter 8. The Black Files, Austin, Texas. Joseph walks into the new Black Files building carrying a bag of Cheetos and 2 coffees. Since the division grew in cases, the FBI rented a building strictly for the Black Files division, much like in the New Orleans division. Joe was happy. He was tired of being stuck in the back of the agency building. It felt like a janitor's closet to him. Plus, now they had access to upgrades, equipment, and computer systems to handle the cases correctly. Joe passed up Mike and Anthony arguing over something as he walked through the office area. Like the New Orleans division, the Austin branch had a barracks, kitchen, training room, offices and weapons room. Michael was often in the weapons room. It was his office. It was equipped with his own tools to make and improve weapons. Passing by Joe could only make out the words vampire, werewolf and how fast they can run. The agent did his best to walk past without being noticed. He did not want to be dragged into their conversion. Joe was already on a mission to butter up to his girlfriend so she could give him some info he needed quickly. Michael called out to Joe, but Joe quickly ran past and up to Sam's office. He opened it up with his elbow and walked in quickly, shutting the door with his foot. The large room was dark, but the 4 computer screens lit up a section. One screen had the Codes and Black Files system. The second monitor had Spotify up while the third in front of Samara had a PC game running. The other screen was downloading something Joe could not make out. Samara was always doing something while she worked. He often wondered if she had ADHD, playing games on company time. For shame. Joe spoke, but Samara did not hear him. She was into the game and the headphones on her head blared. He knew she was blaring music. Joe walked up and stood beside her. He watched her play some cowboy game she was obsessed with. Red Dead something. She was always talking about it and constantly playing it. Joe sat the coffee down and then dangled the bag of Cheetos in front of the screen. Samara pulled off her headphones and quickly grabbed the bag. She spun around in her chair smiling up at Joe. "Oh, thanks. So how was the goat man?" "I didn't get a chance to ask Mikey. I was busy." She spoke as she opened the bag of chips. Real busy, what?" She looked at her game and them to Joe. "I am having to do an update on the servers and log in the stack of late cases your guys and gals forgot to turn in." She rose a blonde brow as she ate. Joe smiled for a moment before getting serious. "Mia Mauer. Oh, what is it?" "You only say that when you want something." Samara removes her glasses and glares at him. "I need a case file set up ASAP." He frowns a bit. Sam's eyes went wide. "Oh, come on. I have just entered and closed 20 cases today. I need to finish the systems update and all kinds of techie stuff, but I brought you Cheetos and coffee." Samara glared at him before putting a Cheeto in her mouth. "And I love you, you are the beautiful señorita. Mi amor te amo con todo mi corazón. Mi ayudas mucho, no fair." Samara huffed as he spoke Spanish to her. It was her weakness. She turned in the chair and minimized her game. "Oh, and what do you need done?" she asked as she placed her glasses back on. "All the info on Mamanaka, Richmond Mand, Merlot, Wyatt Rosses, Conway Rosses, Diana Rosses and Harry Rosses. Anyone else is associated with them. Michael already gave us the rundown, but I need a case file started. You know the procedure. Yes. I know. She sighed and drank her coffee. Samara began to open a case file. Joseph helped her as much as he could. 40 minutes later the agent had everything he needed to open a case officially. She handed him the file and sighed. "You're wearing that Mandalorian helmet," she teased. She wanted him to dress up with her for Comic-Con, but Joe really did not want to. "Fine. I will." He kisses her and walks out. Samara gave me the info on the family, and she had to see what she could find out. It seems they had been funneling money off the record to someone in Mexico. Joe added as he walked towards Michael and Anthony. The other agents were out doing cases, so they were the only 3 in the office area. "We know the fallen one Mammon is helping the family buy up property and damage the land. The sheriff said he will help us as much as he can. He is helping gather more evidence as we speak." Joe added as the others looked over the case file. "Me and Anthony can investigate Mammon. We just need to clear up some current cases in town." The judge added, "I need to look into this Callie. She is Conway's side piece and can possibly help me to get dirt on them. I can get with a white-collar division on this. I am sure they have a lot on Conway and Callie's family." Joe thought out loud, "I just hope the white-collar crimes division doesn't try to roll over and take the Ross's case from us. He may be human, but he is under the guide of Mammon." Michael sighed as he thumbed through the paperwork. "That would be a douche move." Anthony spoke up. "Well, it would not be the first time. Other divisions try to steal our thunder. Just because we are new and getting more funding, well, we can't help the fact that more supernatural are rearing their ugly heads every day. Remember the nail spa being run by that djinn? Paint nails in the front, drains wish and souls in the back." Michael laughed at how Anthony put it. "It was funny how you tried to command her to put the bag of Epsom salt down." Joseph laughed. "All these other agents in the department, and I get stuck with you too." Anthony crossed his arms and complained, "Or should be happy to run with the boss." Joe teased, "I'm not a suck-up." Anthony sucked his teeth. "Well, the others were already agents in the field, you were fresh from the police force." Michael explained. Anthony just looked at him sideways. "Okay guys, you know we promised Sheriff Parks to help him out. Plus, Mammon is a big player. A fallen angel. Getting him will put a dent in the Kingdom of Darkness. Remember when New Orleans took down meth? The activity slowed down almost 50% there." Joe explained. "Don't have to explain that to me. I already know all this. We are fighting a spiritual battle." Michael added with a smile. "So, we need to study and learn everything in these files. All the players and their info." Joe pointed to the large stack. "Too bad you can't call your sister to bring us food like old times." Michael chuckled. "I wish. I miss Billy's cooking and her cake pops. You know she is pregnant." Joseph crossed his arms and conversated with Michael. Anthony was not really paying attention. He was too busy reading his phone. "Oh really? That is nice." "Yes, Sammy told me. My girlfriend talks to my sister more than me." "Well, you are busy. Better keep up with your girlfriend." Anthony added. "What does that mean?" Joe rose a brow. "It means don't let this job become too busy or more important than her. Yes, you two work the same job pretty much, but make sure to put your relationship first." "Okay, Mr. Guru, where is this coming from?" Joe asked. "It is coming from experience. Plus, you are my boss. I am trying to be nice." Anthony pats his back. "What happened to not suck up?" Michael asked with a chuckle. "Oh, that not sucking up." Anthony rolled his eyes and shook his head. She has been asking me to take her to Comic-Con. Joe added, you better take her. Samara lives for the con. Michael added. He had been friends with Samara a long time and knew her ways more than Joe did. I know, I just don't want to dress up. I don't mind going, I just don't think dressing up like it is Halloween is fun. I'm not 9. Joseph sat down and opened the files. If your girl likes it, and it makes her happy no matter how dumb you look, do it. Anthony added in from across the room. Okay, Hitch. Joseph called out. Anthony raised a middle finger to him. I am only helping because I don't want to see Samara upset. When she isn't happy. We are not happy. Remember when she watched Star Wars and Kylo